I wasn't diagnosed with autism until I was 62 years old. Here's how that happened. Welcome everybody, I'm Lynn, and this is Deviated Spectrum. I always felt kind of off, like I couldn't quite get the hang of life. I had a lot of trouble with executive function. I did a video on that, which I will put right up there. I was always exhausted. There were a couple of things that helped. I got sober when I was 24, and I got on depression meds, and that has helped. But I was still always exhausted. I had a partner who had chronic fatigue syndrome, and I felt just like her. So I had myself checked out, and they did blood work, and they did 2 sleep studies, and they did a cardiac stress test and all kinds of stuff, and they found absolutely nothing wrong. So I figured, I guess it's just me, and I'm just going to have to try harder. So I did. I did my best to work through it. I learned to mask really, really well. I always managed to get the important stuff done on time at all my jobs. And so people were pretty happy with my work, with one exception. I could never really put in a full week's work. There was a lot of time at work where I was really unproductive. So I kind of limped along. I was living in places where I had a lot of support. But that changed when I got a job in upstate New York as an academic librarian. This was going to be someplace I didn't know anybody. And so I was living in Santa Fe at the time. I stuffed everything in my car that I could, including 2 dogs and a cat. And I made my way up to Oswego, New York. It was right on Lake Ontario, which is gorgeous. And I did pretty well in that job. But the move to New York really just did me in. I would work all week as best I could. And then at the end of the week, I went to bed. And I stayed there until Monday morning, basically. I couldn't do anything. And there were some days when I couldn't even get to work. It wasn't going to happen. And so I would call in, and sometimes as many as 3 days in a row. And that's what it took for me to function. A friend knew what kind of trouble I was having, and she suggested that I might be autistic. She has an autistic daughter, and I had related to some of the things that her daughter had said and done. So I decided to check it out. And I took the online tests, and it was like, yeah, maybe. So I started to look for a professional diagnosis. I really wanted to know, am I just not trying hard enough, or is there something really going on? So I started looking for somebody who could diagnose adults. And the first place I called was actually an autistic center. And I explained I'm 60 years old and having these troubles and blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, if you were autistic, you'd probably know it. And I'm like, okay, thank you very much. Fortunately, I had done enough research by then to know that that's not necessarily the case. So I did find a psychologist, and it was going to be about a 2-month wait. And so during that 2-month time, I started gathering information, all the information I could. Stuff from my childhood in particular, because if it didn't start in childhood, it's not autism. So here's some of the things that I put on my list. Probably the most obvious is, I was talking to my mom once before she died, and we were on the subject of sense of humor. And I said something about, I'm glad I've always had a sense of humor. And she said, no, you haven't. She said, we had to teach you. We had to say, isn't that funny, every time something was funny, because you had no clue. And that was a shock to me. I thought, it was naturally, but when I started thinking about it, I remember spending a lot of energy trying to get jokes, having trouble getting jokes. So that did fit. I sucked my thumb until I was about 10 years old. And as a toddler, I would suck my thumb and then rub on my nose until it bled. And so I had a Band-Aid on my nose during much of my toddlerhood. My dad was putting in tile, and he ordered tile samples. And they were a bunch of them, like boxes. And they were all 3" by 3" maybe. And I spent so much time sorting those out into by color, by texture, by how light or dark it was, whether it had glitter or not. I built little houses with them. I always sorted my M&Ms by color, and I ate them one color at a time. I had sensory issues. Anything with lace, any kind of elastic anywhere. I remember hating the sound of our electric knife sharpener. I was really introverted, wanted to spend time alone, and my special interest was horses, and so my happy place was in my room doing something or anything to do with horses. And then I went through old family pictures and looked for pictures that might have clues, and I found pictures that had the Band-Aid on my nose. And I took all of this information and gathered it up, and I took it to the psychologist. I wanted to be super, super honest. By then I knew what you should say if you're autistic, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted a really objective evaluation. So I told the truth, even though it totally undermined an autism diagnosis. I was truthful. There were 3 visits. The first one was tests and I guess talking. The second one I don't really remember so well. The third one I got my diagnosis, and I was absolutely normal, and I'm autistic. And she said, and I don't know if this is true, she said that it was a classic case. She also pointed out that in all of the pictures that I brought her, that I wasn't smiling in any of them. This picture, by the way, is of me at my 3rd birthday party. So that's how I got diagnosed. So what did it do for me? It brought a lot of relief. It gave me the permission to quit trying to mold my brain into something it just wasn't. It gave me permission to ease up on myself, quit saying, I can figure this out, I'm going to get this, I'm going to remember this thing, I'm going to take a shower. It should be, it should be so simple, I'm just going to take a shower. And it was a real relief to find out that all of that stuff felt hard because it was hard. And it's giving me a chance, giving me permission to appreciate the brain I have. So all in all, it's been a really good experience. And I am so grateful that I had insurance that would cover it. So I'm going to keep getting to know myself and learning who the hell I am. Yeah. That's my story. That's my diagnosis story. Please subscribe if you'd like. Do all the things. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Hi, everybody. Welcome to, God, I want to say demented. And I was lucky that I was living in places that had, I was living in places